Hello, my friends. It's Monday, November 10th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your red state refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, your home for pothead political punditry. Coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
On this week's Smoke Session, it's Democrats Cave 2, Shutdown Boogaloo, as Dems trade our health care for a Republican promise. Donald Trump is dying, and that makes him more dangerous. Democrats have their best week in the Trump era, then flush it away. The Epstein Files will never be released without a Democratic trifecta. Maybe. FBI announces more non-white guys busted for rigging bets. A new campaign for medical marijuana in Idaho actually has funding. And my radical rant on the blowjob that doomed America. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits. And actually, this week, all my quick hits are political, but they're short. First of all, I managed to catch the press conference from the Josephine County GOP. Pretty much their leadership and all of their officers, or most of them, I guess, all quit.
I am Joseph Rice, the duly elected chair of the Josephine County Republican Party. In the last 4 months, it has become incredibly evident the corruption within the Josephine County Republican Party that's been facilitated by the previous chair, by a small group, have worked to undermine the party, and it has become impossible to go forward with anything that's ethical. The Republican Party needs to run on ethics, morality, fairness, and has to be direct representation of the citizens and people in Josephine County.
They all stood at the steps of the Josephine County Courthouse to announce that they were quitting the Josephine County Republican Party and starting their new organization, United Conservatives. They cite problems with corruption on the city council and the county commission. No word on whether or not there just wasn't enough corruption for their liking. Also want to send a quick hit of congratulations out to Zoran Mamdani for winning a majority of the votes in the New York City mayoral election. And I loved his speech, his acceptance speech, where he first of all said, I wish Andrew Cuomo the best in his private life, but let this be the last time I ever mention his name. And the other part, which was just the most sublime dig, he said, a wise man, I think he said a wise man, he said, a wise man once said, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. And folks, if you have any political knowledge, you remember that that wise man he's speaking of is former New York governor and father of Andrew Cuomo, Mario Cuomo. Oh, burn! And before we move on to our main story, a word from the Senate Chaplain.
Lord, when a house is burning, the first step should be to unite in extinguishing the flames, not seeking to discover who started the fire. Today, inspire our lawmakers to unite in putting out the fire of this government shutdown that has already burned far more than anticipated.
Which leads me to my regular mini rant. Why the fuck do we have a Senate chaplain? Why are my taxpayer dollars going to establish a religion in my legislature? Why are we asserting the existence of a deity in my government? As far as I'm concerned, this country went to hell in 1953 the minute we started taking e pluribus unum off of our money and putting in God we trust. This whole notion that there's some sort of secular recognition of deity, secular recognition of God, that doesn't somehow put us atheists into second-class citizenship is abominable. My last podcast, I talked about a woman who couldn't get seated on a jury because every time she asked to be affirmed rather than sworn in on a Bible, she gets rejected in the voir dire process. Get God out of my government. Well, of course, our main story today is the return, once again, to the spelunking adventures of Democrats' Cave. Yes, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats once again have sold us out, once again have shown no spine, once again have stood up for their wealthy donors rather than their base. As Adam Serwer so thoughtfully puts it on Blue Sky, the problem with American politics is the GOP is terrified of the Republican base, but the Democrats are terrified of the Republican base. Nobody's terrified of the Democratic base. They feel like there's no harm in capitulating once again to empty promises from the Republican Party. I can't believe how freaking naive. I called these senators last night as this deal was going down, and I left them all messages, at least the ones whose voice boxes weren't completely full. And I just asked a simple question. When were you born? When were you born, Senator? Was it yesterday? Because you're telling me that after 40 days of this shutdown, you're going to cave, you're going to give in based on a promise from the Republicans that sometime in the future, we may have a vote on saving our American health care, what little bit of it that we actually have. You sold our magic beans for a promise. And I'm reading all of the posts on Blue Sky today and people analyzing this stuff, and there's a few things to get to, so forgive me for this being a little bit scattered, but I'm so angry about this. It's just hard to comprehend what's going on. I mean, we just had the No Kings rallies where 2.75% of the adult American population went out into the streets and protested this regime. We've got on our news day after day scenes of ICE ripping children away from their parents, running through schools, snatching teachers out of schools, using pit maneuvers on our streets, shooting on our streets at people, tear gassing neighborhoods, getting ready for Halloween parades. We had an election where the Democrats swept every race with much larger than expected margins. We had the president go to the Washington Commanders game on Sunday and get mercilessly booed by 70,000 people for 2.5 minutes straight. We've got Trump's approval ratings at the lowest, not only just for himself, but the lowest of any president ever. And this is the moment where the Democrats go, oh yeah, this is where we need to cave. This is where we need to give in. People are starting to believe in us too much. They're starting to have too much enthusiasm for our party. Well, we better tamp that down. As we look through the list of these senators that voted for it, it's Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada, Dick Durbin from Illinois, Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, Tim Kaine from Virginia, Angus King from Maine, Jackie Rosen from... Where is Jackie Rosen from? Is she the one from Nevada and Cortez Masto? I forget. Doesn't matter. Shaheen from New Hampshire, and of course, Fetterman for Pennsylvania. And how convenient that all 8 of them that voted to stab us in the back are not up for re-election in 2026. You'll notice that Chuck Schumer voted no and Jon Ossoff voted no. Guys that are facing elections that are coming up. And don't think that Chuck Schumer voting no means anything. This is so clearly orchestrated by Democratic leadership that wanted to give in, wanted to capitulate, wanted to cave, then made sure to have the meeting and get everyone organized. Oh, let's make sure that all the no votes are people that aren't coming up for re-election. Also interesting to note how much money each one of those 8 received from the American Airlines PAC. Because what's becoming kind of obvious here, it wasn't us suffering out here in America, doing without our SNAP benefits, living without our government in operation for 40 days or so, federal employees going without, some of them having to work without paychecks. And we go through all of that, all that suffering that we put up with. But the minute Road Rules Sean Duffy, our Secretary of Transportation, starts getting up and talking about how, oh, this is going to affect airline travel, we're going to start cutting down how many flights can be flying, it's going to really affect Thanksgiving travel. Now, all of a sudden, they got to capitulate. Because it's going to affect rich people and their travel plans. It's going to affect airline CEOs and their compensation packages. Once again, a Democratic Party that is more than willing to fight for the big money interests out there, but not you and me. And no, Chuck Schumer, no, Jon Ossoff, you don't get a pass on this. Or any of you corporate centrist Dems out there that voted no because you know you've got cover. Because these 8 who aren't up for re-election are taking the hit. And some of those 8, like Durbin and some of the others, they're retiring. What do they care? How this party could take all of the goodwill, all of the momentum that has been built up between No Kings through this election, through Mamdani's amazing win, who again, these corporate centrist Dems couldn't get behind either, and absolutely flush it down the toilet. As this guy out on Blue Sky puts out, it's okay, everyone. About 30% of federal employees are veterans. We're used to our sacrifices meaning nothing to the power elite. The extra kick in the balls of it being on the day just before Veterans Day really drives home the fuck your feelings message from the Democratic Party. Chuck Schumer needs to be primaried. I sure hope AOC does that. All of these Democrats need to be primaried. Every single one of them. To have sold us out like this. And remember, this sellout comes on the heels of the last sellout. Back in March. Go check my episode back from March 14th. I entitled Return to Democrats Cave. This was the last time they caved on the shutdown. And when they caved in March, they did that. They said, oh, well, we're going to cave in there because Mike Johnson promises to restore $1.1 billion to Washington, D.C. funding. That never happened. Mike Johnson never took that up. They gave up the shutdown in March for the promise of funding D.C., and it never happened. We caved back in March because, well, this will come back around in September. We'll get a better deal in September. But now, November. But now we're caving in November. No, I guess it was September when the deal would come up, and the government's been out since then. Whatever. We cave again here in November with the promise, oh, well, there'll be a vote in December. We'll have a vote in December on the ACA. Do you think that's really going to happen? You think Lucy's going to hold the football this time, Chuck? And even if that vote does come around in December, are you sure you win that vote? You're still a 53-47 Senate. How are you going to win that vote in December when there's no threat, when there's no leverage of a shutdown to force their hand? We had increasing. You checked all the polls. Everybody was blaming the Republicans for this shutdown. For once, the Democrats finally stood up and fought. And you saw people reacting to that. Like, oh my God, the Democrats are fighting and feeling it. And now to just stab us in the back. Oh my God. So yeah, we're gonna reopen the government. We're going to allow 15 million people to be kicked off the Affordable Care Act. We're going to allow people's health insurance premiums skyrocket to double, triple, quadruple what they once were. Because we got a promise that there'll be a vote in December that we might not win. But even if we did win it, it would then have to go over to the House and be voted on. You think it's going to win in the House? Hell, do you even think the House is going to be open then? Mike Johnson has already kept the House out of session for weeks now because he doesn't want to swear in Adelita Grijalva, the 218th signature on the Epstein Files. And now you give him a second reason? Now, not only do I not want to vote on the Epstein Files, now I'll keep the House out so we don't have to vote on restoring any of these ACA subsidies and taking away the tax cuts from the billionaires. At some point, you got to wonder how complicit the Democrats are in this. People like Chuck Schumer, how much are they working for the Republican Party? I can't blame people for being turned off of politics. I can't blame people for not wanting to vote when this is what they see. One party, the Republicans, that are evil to the core and 100% dedicated to enriching the wealthy among us and harming the poor, and its opposition party, which says that it likes poor people and says that it wants to fight for people's rights, but not if it's inconvenient. I really think that a large part of why these centrist Dems caved was because it was affecting their air travel. They couldn't fly back and forth from D.C. as easily. They had to stand in more lines. There was more hassle at the airport. That's what people are seeing from this. That's what they believed. Another report we're getting out of this is that there was fear amongst the Democrats that with all this talk from Donald Trump about abolishing the filibuster so that they could just get on with it, they were afraid that if they kept the shutdown going on, all this talk from Donald Trump would cause them to abolish the filibuster, and then the Republicans would go ahead and pass this bill that takes away everyone's health care. So let me get this straight. You want to get rid of the leverage you've been using to stop a terrible bill because the Republicans might get rid of the leverage you've been using to stop a terrible bill. Well, we better not use the filibuster because then they might want to get rid of it. So let's not use it. Well, then what point is there of having it if you're not going to use it? Insane. Chuck Schumer pulls the Democrats back from the brink of courage. And to think about how the Affordable Care Act, how we only have Obamacare because of that fateful day in the United States Senate when Republican John McCain bucked his party and gave the famous thumbs down. One brave Republican senator saved Obamacare so that a decade or so later, 8 spineless Democrats could lose it. We should just start sending file folders to their offices. You know those manila file folders? Because they're all folders. They folded. They're weak. They're spineless. I like this one. People are blaming Republicans for food prices and flight cancellations and health insurance costs and are furious about gilded ballrooms and Gatsby parties, and the president is falling asleep on TV and is most deeply unpopular president in history. Time to cave is a hell of an argument. But let me Let's turn to Senator Chris Murphy, one of the few good Democrats out there. He's got a pretty good understanding of what's happening now.
I think there will be some pretty substantial damage done to a Democratic brand that has been rehabilitated if on the heels of an election in which the people told us to keep fighting, we immediately stop fighting. If we surrender without having gotten anything, and we cause a lot of folks in this country who had started to believe in the Democratic Party to retreat again, I worry that it will be hard to sort of get them back up off the mat in time for next fall's election cycle.
Maybe that's the case. Maybe we'll be too depressed to get off the mat for the 2026 midterms, but I think we might be even more motivated to get up for the 2026 primaries. It's time to start primarying every one of these spineless Democrats. And boy, I tell you, this throws a whole new light, too, on the Graham Plattner Senate campaign in Maine as well. Boy, Nazi tattoo and all, but you got to wonder, would he be another spineless Democrat like the governor there, Janet Mills? Would she go along to get along? She's 79. She's in that octogenarian Democratic leadership mold, just like Chuck Schumer, just like Dick Durbin, still playing the game the old way, thinking that promises from the other side actually mean something, like Jeanne Shaheen thinks.
So my Democratic colleagues and I have been ready to work on this issue, on extending these tax cuts for months. With the government reopening shortly, Senate Republicans now finally have to come to the table. Or, make no mistake, Americans will remember who stood in the way. So I urge Speaker Johnson to finally return the House of Representatives into session and quickly reopen the government.
Taking a look at the national scene here, and I suppose you all saw the video that happened the other day where Trump is in the Oval Office with Dr. Oz and RFK Jr. announcing how they're going to be cutting the price of obesity drugs. And during the press conference, a man passed out, and we got that iconic photo of Trump standing there, dazed, confused, behind the Resolute desk, just standing there while over his left shoulder there is a man on the ground, another man holding his feet up, people attending to this man who'd had a medical incident, and Trump couldn't even be bothered to look at him. I captioned the photo, "Why does all this bad stuff keep happening to me?" Because that's what it is to Trump. It's all about Trump, and he's just pissed off that someone else is taking the attention away from him. But the part about this that I found the funniest in the video, now everybody paid attention to the photo there, where Trump is looking dazed and confused, but to me the video was the funniest because as soon as the guy falls out, RFK Jr. looks around and bolts. Just bolts, exits, stage right even. And I've seen that look before, folks. I've seen that look before. That's the look of a guy who just shared a rail of Coke with someone else who said, "Oh, yeah, I can handle that much. No problem." And then that guy passes out at the party. "Oh, shit, I'm out of here." Yeah. RFK ran away like a guy who just overdosed someone. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I've just seen that look before. That's someone who doesn't want to be held accountable for something. As someone else put it, he Chappaquiddicked out there real quick, didn't he? But this brings me to the point, and that point is Donald Trump is dying. He is dying, and we are in a really dangerous time right now because the only thing that's been constraining Trump is not the fear of consequences, because he's got the Republican Party and the Supreme Court in his back pocket. No, the thing that's been holding Trump back is the future. Trump only gets restrained by what might restrain him in the future. I can't do this now because I might want to do it in the future. If I do it now, I can't do it in the future. There's always a future involved. How am I going to get over the next day, the next cycle? But with Donald Trump dying, he no longer has to fear the future. With Donald Trump dying, what's to stop him from launching a nuke against someone that pisses him off? What's to stop him from bombing an American city when there's a protest? The training wheels are off. There are no guardrails. We keep hearing Trump saying, oh, I don't think I'm going to get into heaven. I'd like to get into heaven. I don't think I'm going to get there, though. I don't think I'll get to heaven. You see it with him gilding the White House now, looking like a Bed Bath & Beyond. Live, laugh, love. He's got the Oval Office stamped outside the West Wing, which isn't the actual Oval Office, but it would be something you'd put next to a door that leads to the Oval Office if someone were, say, going demented and losing track of where they're at. I'm telling you, Donald Trump is dying, and we see it in how the Republicans behind him are starting to maneuver. How we're starting to get J.D. Vance making the moves on Erica Kirk there, trying to solidify his position, questioning his wife's Hindu religion. He's starting to see being married to a brown-skinned Hindu might not be the best way to be the prophet for the white Christian nationalist homeland. And looky there, there's a blonde white lady, Erica Kirk, freshly martyred husband, freshly minted superstar. I wouldn't be surprised to see J.D. Vance getting an annulment, because he's Catholic, right? He'd have to get an annulment or something. Usha, he's not going to be sticking around very long. But Donald Trump is dying, and that puts us in a very precarious position. His popularity is waning, even amongst the MAGA. We saw in the elections this last week how he has completely lost all the gains he made with young men and with Hispanics. With Donald Trump in such a terrible position politically and physically, it was the worst possible moment for Democrats to cave and give him new life, but that's what Democrats do. I just hope everybody remains vigilant and careful, because this next year leading up to the midterms is going to be horrific. He knows that accountability is coming. He knows that if he loses this House, it's all over for his presidency. The rest of the last 2 years of his presidency is nothing but investigations and hearings and accountability. And it appears we can't count on most of the Democrats to fight for us. It's going to take more of us out in the streets. It's going to take more of these No Kings rallies. And maybe it's going to start taking some strikes. I see people talking about general strikes for the time between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday. Take out that whole Black Friday weekend. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take our collective effort in shutting shit down, because the Democrats are far too beholden to big donors, big money, corporate interests to be anything of use to us in this moment. It's going to take collective action from the people. Don't trust any Democrat over the age of 60, and look twice at the ones under the age of 60. All right, time to take a look to my left and see what's happening with the Democrats, aside from them retreating to Democrats' cave once again. And, well, it's kind of related to that, because it's just amazing to me how this past week has gone. And everything that happened leading up to last night, leading up to Sunday night, for an entire week, it was nothing but good news over here in Democrat land. Nothing but good news. First on Monday, Dick Cheney died. Dick Cheney died, and there were no hagiographies out there. There were no letters of commendation and eulogy of Dick Cheney. Most people agreed that Dick Cheney was an asshole. Dick Cheney lied us into a war. Dick Cheney is a war criminal who approved of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, a.k.a. torture. So we start our week off on Monday with Dick Cheney dying and Democrats generally being proven right in their disdain for him. Then on Tuesday, we have the elections. We have Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger winning governor's races by 13 and 15 points respectively. We have Zoran Mamdani, a named Democratic socialist, winning a majority of the vote. When there's two Democrats in the race, when Andrew Cuomo was in the race, young, progressive, Democratic socialist beat old, moneyed, Democratic centrist. The writing's on the wall. So Democrats are high as a kite after those Tuesday elections went all over the country. Georgia flipped a couple of seats on a board. Mayor in Cincinnati gets elected. Red states and blue states all across the country, every election went the Democrats' way. Then we get word that Trump's got record low approval ratings. On Wednesday, we have the Supreme Court. We have Neil Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, making waves about Congress abdicating its power to declare war, actually standing up for the power of one of the other branches that's not the president. We also have the Supreme Court questioning the president's ability to do tariffs on a whim. We have the Supreme Court on Wednesday in two different ways standing up for the power of Congress. Yet another good thing to happen on the Democratic side. On Thursday, we get the announcement from Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi that at the age of 85, she's decided not to run for re-election. More good news for the Democrats. Again, clearing out more of this octogenarian Democratic leadership that is not suited for the moment in which we live. Now, I will grant, Speaker Pelosi was probably the most effective and powerful Speaker of the House, definitely in my lifetime, maybe ever. So is fantastic at marshaling votes and keeping her caucus together. Unlike, say, Chuck Schumer. But she is a creature of the 1900s. A pre-Trump politics, pre-social media, pre-internet creature. Finally, we can have someone come out of that San Francisco district who will probably be a hell of a lot more progressive. We have all of this great news. And then we go into the weekend with more polls showing that the American people are blaming the Republicans for the shutdown. That Democrats are starting to get better approval numbers because they're finally showing some fight. They're finally not rolling over and giving in. And then we also had the verdict in the sandwich guy case. The guy in D.C. who threw a sub sandwich at a Border Patrol guy, an ICE guy who was wearing body armor. And they acquitted him because they couldn't show that the sandwich could cause any grievous bodily harm to a guy in body armor. This cop has to go the rest of his life being known as the sandwich guy, the guy who was assaulted by the sandwich. We get a clear acquittal, standing for the rights of protesters. Yet another victory in our opposition against the Trump regime. And all of last week, all of those gains, all of the goodwill mustered for the Democratic Party for one of its best weeks during this regime, all tossed away by the octogenarian Democratic leadership in the Senate, who couldn't be inconvenienced for their Thanksgiving air travel. All right, time to take a look to my right and see what the Republicans are up to, which for yet another week is a bunch of nothing, because Mike Johnson refuses to call the House into session because he doesn't want to swear in Adelita Grijalva from Arizona, who will be the 218th signature for the discharge petition to release the Epstein Files. And I want to talk about this because there's a lot of misinformation and confusion out there about this, and I see it coming out on Blue Sky from people who I assume are on the left, and I need to get some things through your thick skulls. First of all, the discharge petition to release the Epstein Files does not release the Epstein Files. I keep worrying about this because people get their hopes up like, okay, once we get the House in session and Adelita Grijalva is sworn in, she'll be the 218th signature, and then the Epstein Files will be released and the Republicans' House of Cards all falls down. It's not how it's going to work. The House would have to have a vote to release the Epstein Files. Any vote that comes up in the House is something that has to be called by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson does not want to call a vote on releasing the Epstein Files. So the way around a reticent speaker is a discharge petition. That's where you get a majority of the House of Representatives to say, screw you, Speaker, we're going to vote on this. Okay? Now, the House has 435 members. Half of that is 217.5. So if you get up to 218, you got a majority of the House, and then a vote can be held on releasing the Epstein Files. Okay? So, House comes into session. Adelita Grijalva is sworn in. She's the 218th signature. That means now there will be a vote to release the Epstein Files. That doesn't mean the Epstein Files get released immediately. Okay, you're saying, what's the difference? You're splitting hairs here, because if 218 people signed it, then certainly when it comes to a vote, 218 people are going to vote for it, right? Yeah, probably. And in fact, I would bet maybe even up to 100 more people vote for it. I bet you get up to 300 votes to release the Epstein Files. Because once it comes to a vote, a lot of those Republicans in the House are going to say, hey, I don't want to have my name saying, don't uncover the pedophiles, protect the pedophiles, right? Johnson didn't want the vote to happen in the first place, so a lot of his Republicans wouldn't have to say, release the Epstein Files. Right? So, Adelita Grijalva's signature then gets the vote to happen, which puts Republicans in the House on record as wanting to release the Epstein Files. But even then, it doesn't happen, because then that vote has to go to the Senate. And the Senate is 53-47 Republicans, and they're never going to vote to release the Epstein Files. Well, maybe we pressure them. Who knows? Maybe we could get some to pressure. Josh Hawley seems a little squishy on it, doesn't want to be the guy that's standing up to protect pedophiles. But I bring all this up just to get people in the mindset that Grijalva is not the magic key that suddenly releases the Epstein Files. She's the first step that takes it to a vote that then takes it to the Senate. And then even if we did get it past the Senate, miracle of miracles, we get enough people to flip, you know where it goes then? To the desk of Donald John Trump, pedophile in chief, who will veto it. Folks, the Epstein Files aren't getting released. They're never going to see the light of day. All those rich, powerful, pedophilic men will never be called to account. I just want to steel you for that. I want you to be ready for the fact that we're going to die never seeing those Epstein Files. Unless we can elect a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president for 2028. Only with trifecta power are we ever going to possibly see the release of those Epstein Files. And with the way the Democrats have caved this week, I'm a little less sanguine on the possibility of us retaking the House and the Senate. Now, there's one other bit of misinformation I want to get to regarding this, because I see this being passed around on Blue Sky, various memes and graphics, people passing it around like it's a fact. Let me just read it to you. Have you wondered how long Mike Johnson is going to refuse to seat Adelita Grijalva? It seems he is waiting for a Republican to win a special election in Tennessee to cancel her vote to release the Epstein Files. Just imagine how bad what is in those files must be for Trump and his fellow pedophiles. You know what you need to do. Yeah, this is this idea that Johnson is not swearing in Grijalva until this other special election finishes in Tennessee that elects a Republican who'd then cancel out Grijalva's signature. That's not how this works. Remember the math I told you? 435 people in the Congress? 217.5 is half of that? 218 is more than half of that? The new guy doesn't get to undo Grijalva's signature, dummies. He might be the 217th signature against it, or the 217th person not to sign it, but he can't take away someone else's signature. I've had to fan this one down 5 or 6 different sources out there in Blue Sky from the people who aren't thinking it through. You don't get to cancel out someone's signature. You don't erase someone's signature. You either sign or you do not sign. So he might be the 217th not to sign, but Grijalva will be the 218th to sign. In sports this week, we've got more scandal when it comes to rigging sports gambling. The latest story coming out of Major League Baseball on November 9th, Cleveland Guardians pitchers Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz were indicted for prosecutors for their roles in an illegal pitch rigging scheme. Basically, they would let bettors know what pitches they were going to throw at what times, and so the bettors could bet on that and make a whole bunch of money. Which, I bring this up again from the last podcast when we talked about sports, how it was inevitable when this sports gambling became so granular that you could bet on whether a guy's going to make his first free throw, whether he's going to make a tackle, whether this guy's going to pitch a fastball on a 3-2 count or whatever. When you get it that granular, you make it so easy for people to cheat. How easy is it to convince a pitcher, hey, man, you can make 10 grand. Just, when you pitch to so-and-so, make sure your first pitch is a slider. Pitch whatever you want for the rest of the game, for everything else. Just one, it's just one little pitch. Just one pitch. Just pitch a slider. There's one pitch, and you'll make 10 grand. Or miss your first free throw. How much harm could that cause? Your first free throw, it's 3 minutes into the game. Missing one free throw is not going to hurt the whole game. Besides, it'll just make you 10 grand. How easy is that? Of course this was going to become a scandal. Of course this was going to happen. Now, I said it on the podcast before, I don't think sports gambling should be illegal. I think it's worse when you put it in the hands of the mob, when you can't have any sort of auditing or oversight of what's going on. I always believe that prohibition just makes things worse. However, how legal something is can make somewhat of a difference. Like, I think heroin should be legal, but I don't think you should be able to just buy it at the grocery store, okay? Like, there ought to be some limits to these things. Yes, heroin being illegal is bad. It's worse under prohibition because it gets cut with fentanyl. You get bad batches, you get criminals dealing it. It makes people unsafe. Yes, but it would be better if it were legal. But it'd have to be controlled. It couldn't just be Wild West out there. And what we've done with sports gambling is it's Wild West. We've just let everything, every possible thing you could bet on, we can now bet on. So I would call on Congress to rein in some of these prop bets, to make prop betting illegal, to make one individual's achievements something you can bet on. I think that's where the problem is. It's a lot harder to convince an entire team to throw a game. Like betting on who wins, who loses requires you to have, 9 guys on a baseball team or 5 guys on the basketball team or 11 guys on the football team all in collusion. That's a lot harder. But when you're just convincing one pitcher to throw a slider or one basketball player to miss a free throw, that's way too corruptible, way too easy. And the other thing I wanted to bring up about this, and I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe it's the fact that minorities are overrepresented proportionally in our professional sports, but I'm kind of noticing a pattern. In the NBA scandal, they busted Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier and Damon Jones. In this one, it's Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz. So 3 black men and 2 Afro-Latinos. And as I look through the list of all the people that have been roped into these scandals, I see a whole lot of Spanish names. Here, some of the nicknames: Spanish G, Black Tony, Albanian Bruce. Maybe there was one white guy. But it seems to Black Rob, Pookie. It seems to me a lot of these names, we have a lot of Italian names as well because some Cosa Nostra involved in this. It just seems to me that the FBI is moving quickly on busting these guys as part of a political move to cast black people, to cast non-whites as criminals, to shore up that MAGA white Christian nationalism. Maybe it's just coincidence, but I gotta believe there's some white people out there cheating on sports gambling too. I have yet to see any of their faces in the news. That country baseline means it's time for our Boycott Idaho segment, where I remind you all the reasons why you should avoid the handmade state. Now with 76 reasons, all available at radicalruss.com/Idaho. And today we've got some interesting Idaho news coming by way of something called the Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho. And they are a brand new political organization put together to support the Idaho Medical Cannabis Act, a petition they're trying to put on the ballot for the 2026 election. Now, as you know, or maybe you don't know, I am one of the people that have tried to get medical cannabis on the ballot in the state of Idaho. I was directly involved in 2020 when my father was the chief petitioner for the Idaho Medical Marijuana Act. And in 2022, I put forth a decriminalization measure called the Personal Adult Marijuana Decriminalization Act. Of course, neither of these got to the ballot. We had our best shot in 2020. We got about 44,000 signatures before COVID forced us to stop signature gathering. But we've been trying since 2012, and I've been involved somewhat with all of the attempts since 2016. And the problem is, with every attempt trying to get medical marijuana passed in the state of Idaho, is it's always been an all-volunteer grassroots effort, which is great from the perspective of politics, having people that are dedicated to the issue and wanting to get it passed. But that means they lack one major factor, and that is money. We never, ever had any money to really do any signature gathering or politicking for these measures. We've tried many times. We reached out with all the contacts I had, trying to find people who'd be interested in funding a medical marijuana campaign for the state of Idaho. And we came close again in 2020, had meetings with the Marijuana Policy Project and other people, but nobody ever wanted to fund us. All the funding always ended up going somewhere else. In 2020, it went to South Dakota, which ended up passing marijuana legalization, and then their Supreme Court canned it. That was when Kristi Noem was governor, as a matter of fact. So this is different. This Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho apparently is well funded. My sources in Idaho tell me that they've gotten $750,000 in donations already, which brings up some of the politics involved in this stuff, because this proposal from the natural medicine people is to create a fairly strictly limited medical marijuana program for Idaho for conditions like cancer, AIDS, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, Crohn's disease, PTSD, or Alzheimer's. Note, no chronic pain in that list of conditions. Chronic pain is always the condition that gets cut off when we talk about these more conservative states, because people feel that chronic pain is just the backache excuse to be able to smoke pot for fun. Never mind the fact that pain is one of the conditions for which we have the most verifiable scientific evidence for its efficacy. Some of these other things, like post-traumatic stress, while we agree that it works well for people, we don't have a whole lot of evidence scientifically to back that up. Still, some medical marijuana would be better than none in the state of Idaho. They want to create a regulated licensing system for Idaho producers and dispensaries, prohibit the public use of medical cannabis, and another part here, they want to prohibit the sharing of medical cannabis with others. And I'd have to look at the language of this, because this could be a little bit problematic. I've seen this where states try to say that, patients can't share medical cannabis. The problem is sometimes one patient has some and another patient does not. So are you going to say for real that the patient who's got a joint can't pass it to another patient? That's probably what they're trying to set up here. So I would worry a little bit about that. The other thing I worry about is, according to the reports that I've received, the donation of $750,000 to this campaign committee comes from 3 hemp farmers in the state. Idaho does allow for the farming of hemp. It was the 50th state to pass legalization of industrial hemp. And even so, hemp is not legal in the state of Idaho unless you have a piece of paper that says it's hemp. Yeah, you could grow a field full of hemp, and it could all be less than 0.3% THC, actual hemp. But without a license that says you're a hemp grower, that stuff's marijuana, even though you couldn't smoke it and get high. So Idaho already has one of the strictest hemp farming regulations there is. And the report I got was this $750,000 came from 3 different hemp farmers. And coincidentally, in the initiative they're trying to pass, it licenses only 3 grow sites for producing the medical cannabis. Isn't that interesting? Now, the other thing that's interesting about this campaign is the fact that there's already something else concerning medical marijuana that's going to be on the 2026 ballot in Idaho, and that's House Joint Resolution 4. This is a proposed constitutional amendment for the Idaho Constitution that would make it so that only the Idaho legislature has the power to legalize marijuana or any other narcotic. Basically, this is a constitutional amendment to make medical marijuana initiatives impossible. A constitutional amendment to take away the initiative power from the Idaho citizens concerning marijuana. You could pass an initiative on anything else, but you can't pass an initiative on medical marijuana. C. Scott Grow, yeah, that's the name of the senator who hates marijuana in the state of Idaho. C. Scott Grow. Grow, Scott, grow. Yeah, C. Scott Grow, who's also an emeritus member of the, the Council of 70, the Congress of 70, whatever they call it, the quorum, that's it, the quorum of 70 for the LDS Church. So he's like a senator for the Mormons and a senator for the state of Idaho. Anyway, C. Scott Grow has been opposing marijuana ever since we've tried to get it passed, and he's one of the people that continues to say that these big money special interests in Idaho are going to come to Idaho and legalize medical marijuana. And he said, quote, "Too many legislatures across this nation have sat back and just waited as initiative after initiative would come after them until finally they overwhelm it and overwhelm the legislature. We are acting because that's our responsibility." So C. Scott Grow's proposed constitutional amendment would ban any initiatives from passing medical marijuana. This is on the heels of Idaho passing the nation's only mandatory minimum fine for marijuana possession. You get caught with pot in Idaho, it costs you $300. And you can still be arrested, but you will at least pay a $300 fine. So, HJR 4, if it passes, makes legalizing medical marijuana impossible by initiative, and it sets a 2/3 majority threshold for the legislature to do it. So, if this HJR 4 passes in 2026, marijuana will be illegal in the state of Idaho for the foreseeable future, for the rest of my lifetime. Now, if these natural medicine people manage to get enough signatures, and they're talking about doing paid signature gathering at $5 a signature, folks. So if you got that kind of money, you can definitely get this on the ballot, especially in a state where you only need 70,000 signatures. 70,000 times 5, that's $350,000, isn't it? And they already got 750,000? God, what I could have done with $750,000. Anyway, a lot better than me and Dad standing on snowy street corners in county seats, that's for sure. Anyway, if natural medicine manages to get their initiative on the ballot at the same time, on the same 2026 ballot as HJR 4, HJR 4 trumps the medical marijuana initiative if they both pass. Literally, the medical marijuana initiative could get 75% yes votes. But if HJR 4 gets 50% plus 1, the medical marijuana initiative loses. It cannot become law because constitutional amendments trump statutory initiatives. And yet, despite this HJR 4 being out there, being an existential threat to medical marijuana, the folks at Natural Medicine are counseling the local activists in Idaho to not talk about it. There is a schism that is formed amongst the activist base in the state of Idaho now, where those who want to educate the public about, hey, don't vote yes on this HJR 4, vote no on HJR 4, are being silenced and shunned by the medical marijuana initiative people. I don't understand that. Maybe it's we don't want to have a confusion in the voter's mind, vote no on one, vote yes on the other. I don't know. Seems to me a bit foolish not to want to educate people about a constitutional amendment that could kill your entire $750,000 signature drive. But okay, that's, I didn't get it passed. What can I say? So I do hope they succeed. I worry about how strict the law would be. But at this point, with so much access to marijuana, legal marijuana across the borders of Idaho, any passage of medical marijuana in the state of Idaho would be a good thing. So I hope they get their stuff together. I hope they're able to do it. They say they have a plan. They say the people involved here, I saw some of the folks that are involved in this organization include Amanda Watson. She is the president and founder of the Boise-based Atlas Strategic Communications. So she's a communications lead. Jeremy Chow is a partner with the Boise law firm Givens Pursley. He's the legal head here. And from my reports from the people on the ground there in the state of Idaho, they also mention that Rob Cronin is the chair. He's a real estate agent out of Sun Valley who helped Bruce Willis and Demi Moore with property. And he also runs a childhood cancer camp. So perhaps has some personal interest in getting medical marijuana passed as well. I'm glad they've got serious law firms, communications firms, and some serious money behind this. I really wish them all the best in getting medical marijuana passed in the state of Idaho. I just hope they also can recognize the hard work that so many activists have put into that state for well over a dozen years now, laying the groundwork for this to be a successful campaign. In the Radical Rant, I want to talk about the blowjob that doomed America. Had to have happened sometime in the late 90s. Bill Clinton was riding high. The dot-com boom was happening. We were balancing the budget, having a budget surplus, record approval ratings. All that wasn't enough for him, though. He was feeling lonely, feeling bored. He hit upon a chubby intern named Monica Lewinsky and got himself a little Hummer in the Oval Office. Maybe a few times. And we all know what happened because of that. Republicans who were wandering in the wilderness, who had lost the last two elections, one with an incumbent President George H.W. Bush, another one with a decorated war hero, Senator Bob Dole, couldn't compete with Slick Willie, who couldn't keep his Slick Willie in his pants. So, given this scandal, the Republicans jump on it. They began through the Starr Commission trying to find information on Whitewater, some land deal from the decade or so before. In all their investigations, they finally unearth that Bill Clinton's getting some on the side. And they get him to admit in front of cameras that he did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. And then, of course, Linda Tripp sells out her friend, produces the infamous blue dress with the semen stains, proving that Bill Clinton was lying. Because of that lying, the trust in the Democratic Party craters. Al Gore, the incumbent vice president running for president in 2000, feels the need to have to distance himself from Bill Clinton and his successful economy and his successful politics. Feels the need to have to prove he is a faithful husband by French kissing his wife Tipper at the DNC, grossing everyone out. It leads to an election that is so close that it comes down to Florida, 537 vote difference, where the counting of the votes was halted by the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision, Bush v. Gore, which happened on November 7th, 2000, when Al Gore was declared the winner of Florida. It wasn't until December that the Supreme Court came around and said it doesn't count. Because calling Al Gore the winner could harm George Bush's chances of winning. They halted the recounting of votes. The Supreme Court decided the votes of people in Florida weren't important enough to actually take more time and verify. We'll just give it to George W. Bush. And from then on, with George W. Bush, imagine the difference in the world we'd have today if Al Gore had been given the presidency that he duly won, that all the recounts done by New York Times and other organizations afterwards proved that Gore would have won a fair recount. But instead, the Supreme Court subverted our democracy, installed George W. Bush. So imagine the next 25 years had Al Gore been our president. Imagine him paying attention to that August presidential daily briefing that warned bin Laden determined to attack in the United States. Imagine, instead of clearing brush in Texas, Al Gore would have been at work receiving these intelligence reports that Saudi Arabian men were taking flight training to learn how to fly, but not how to land jumbo jets. Imagine had he paid attention to that PDB and perhaps foil 9/11. There was enough information prior to 9/11 that had our law enforcement been focused on it, we could have stopped that plot. Imagine America where there was no 9/11 and therefore no war on terror. No George Bush standing on the rubble saying we will have our revenge, attacking a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Inventing, lying about yellow cake uranium to justify invading Iraq and Afghanistan. And imagine, since we didn't invade Iraq and Afghanistan, there would have never been the Abu Ghraib scandal, where our soldiers were revealed to be torturing prisoners. Imagine if George W. Bush had been president when Katrina devastated New Orleans. President Gore would have immediately had FEMA out there helping people. Maybe a whole bunch of families wouldn't have drowned during Katrina. How much farther we'd be ahead on ameliorating climate change with a President Gore. We'd had a 25-year head start from where we are now, and not like we're really starting much now either. All because Slick Willie couldn't keep his Slick Willie in his pants. What an amazing alternate history we might have had if the Supreme Court would have stood up for democracy. And when you look at what happened through that year 2000, the Brooks Brothers riot and all of the shenanigans around Florida, you see some familiar names. You see John Roberts. You see Amy Coney Barrett. You see Brett Kavanaugh. This has all been part of the plan for half a century on the right to undo the civil rights movement, to undo the Reconstruction Amendments, to make America white again, to return us to the vision of our founders, where wealthy white landowners could take whatever they want, take the land, take the women, take the minerals, take the resources, take it all. I really do believe that if Bill Clinton had kept it in his pants, we'd be a quarter century ahead in our Star Trek utopia future we all dream of.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
And that's all the time we've got for the podcast this week, which I will try to continue doing on a weekly basis. I'm sorry for the unpredictable schedule these last few weeks and months. It's been hectic here at the Belleville household and have had a lot of irons in the fire, but we'll get back to regular podcasting on Monday mornings from here on out. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belleville, and governed by Creative Commons share-alike licensing. News clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by me and my bass and my drum machine. Which brings us to our post-credits scene. And have you caught the Lily Allen album? Lily Allen apparently was partnered with David Harbour from the Marvel movies, and apparently he cheated on her, treated her bad, and so she released this entire album that's just totally tearing him apart. It makes me wonder if David Harbour and Dave Coulier hang out at all. Dave Coulier, the last guy who was a victim of a terrible album there with Alanis Morissette, and you ought to know. And I suppose there's some Taylor Swift victims out there as well. Some guys that did her wrong that ended up in a song. So Travis Kelce, if you're listening, you make sure you treat that lady right. Also, I wanted to bring up the fact that with the shutdown and the withholding of SNAP benefits, we've seen a lot of the SNAP police out, the food stamp police. People who go out to the websites and they find that, lobster is EBT eligible or graham cookies are eligible, and they lament, oh, poor people can buy lobster. How can they buy that on their food stamps? Amazing how much people give a damn about whether some single mom is putting some Pop-Tarts in her grocery cart. And meanwhile, we've got millionaires and billionaires fleecing the system on the regular. Let's maybe pay a little bit more attention to those guys and less to the poor people just trying to get by. So what if someone is buying something luxurious on their SNAP benefits? They probably worked a lot of hours and made a lot of sacrifices to try to make that happen. Maybe they could get a birthday cake for their kid's birthday. But I guess there's some people out there that just think that poor people just ought to always suffer. Well, I'm one of those poor people. I'm on SNAP, and I'm one of the guys that's buying the almost expired milk that goes on sale, and the oops, we baked too much bread, and the here's the clearance stuff we're getting rid of from the damaged boxes. I scrimp and save every dollar of that SNAP benefit to try to keep food on our table. So I've had it with the SNAP police here trying to guilty people for being poor. How about instead we just pay people enough money in their salaries, because most of the people who are on SNAP are working like I am. Why don't we just pay people enough that they can actually afford to feed their families? There's an idea. And finally, one last little rant here in the closing credits. I saw a chart that came up the other day, and it was charting the decline amongst various races for something. I don't remember what it was, but, you know, is white people versus black people versus Hispanic people. And so when you looked at the chart, the white people's line was colored black, and the black people's line was colored red, and the Hispanic people's line was colored pink. And this has always bothered me, and maybe there was a memo that went out that said this is racist or something, but I don't see how it is. Why would you not make a black line for black people, a white line for white people, and a brown line for brown people? Right? It's like, okay, look, this might get more problematic if you started adding in Asians and Native Americans, because that is racist when we call them yellow man or red man, despite all of the references in popular music to those terms. So fine, give the Asians blue and give the natives green. But for the others, we do call people white people and black people and brown people, so why not just use the colors that go with them instead of adding another level of confusion where you have to go, oh yeah, red is white and black is red and red is blue and blue is black. Enough. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com. And nowhere else. No Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram, no MySpace, no whatever the hell else is out there. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Or if you see me in person, you can just hand me cash. I'm a big fan of cash. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.